Hi, I'm Sandeep, and you're watching the Indian Weekender. Today, we are in conversation with Leader of Opposition and Leader of National Party, Honorable Judith Collins, who has joined us this morning at our studio. Welcome to our studio, Judith. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Sandeep, and I hope you're well too.
Sure,
Yeah,
definitely. And from what we have been following you since last 2 odd months, when you have become leader,
yeah,
you
it's
have
about 2 months. Yeah,
yes,
not quite, but yep.
sure, and you have been incredibly busy traveling all
I
around the
have
country,
been,
isn't
yeah,
it?
I have been, and even with all the restrictions on travel and in terms of airplanes and things, we're just doing a lot of driving. So we've been getting everywhere and everywhere we can, and with the restrictions on gatherings of numbers of people, of course, that's causes its own challenges, but we've turned a lot more to digital media and being able to actually get our messages out that way. Also, a lot of phone calls. We're doing a lot of phone calls to people.
Right. And if you can walk us through the starting days of your this new dynamic leadership days, I would say. So, what were your initial thoughts? Like, did you sit down and talk to yourself what you intend to do?
Well, when I got a phone call saying that there was a real support for me to be the leader and to take up this obviously very challenging time with Todd Muller having stood down, I really thought about that, and I spoke to my husband and we discussed it, and I said I'll sleep on it, and because I know it's a tough job, but I also thought actually the country needs a strong leader, and it needs someone to get us through what's going to be really tough economic times. They're only just starting to happen now. So having slept on it, I woke up and said, right, that's it, we're going to do it. Went to Wellington, was selected to be the leader, and got straight onto it. Next day I did the reshuffle of the caucus, brought up Dr. Shane Reedy to be a health
Hmm.
spokesperson, for instance. Was able to put together, I thought, a very good lineup, and I tried not to make too many changes, but I certainly put Simon Bridges back on the front bench. I put Todd Muller on the front bench.
Hmm.
I gave them very decent roles, and I thought, what we've been doing from day one is just running a really positive campaign, but understanding that the economy, jobs, businesses, this is what's going to be hitting New Zealanders pretty soon. We've seen it recently with the yo-yoing in and out of lockdown that we've had,
Sure.
which has been really tough, particularly in Auckland.
Get that. Now, talking about those initial days as well, like, did you also get a chance to identify what was not working for National Party, say, for the 3 months when we were in the middle of COVID?
Well, I think one of the issues for the National Party is always being able to do our job as at the moment, we're the opposition, um, of actually asking the questions that the governments don't like to answer. And what we found is that we had to do that. Sometimes people don't always realise quite why we have to do that, but it was really obvious when it turned out that the government had to confess after questioning that they weren't doing a lot of the testing that they'd promised to do, and we found that obviously some people in the media were also asking those questions as we were, and we finally got some answers. Unfortunately, those answers were not what we wanted to hear because they were very negative about what hadn't been going on. And broken promises basically meant we ended up back in lockdown again. So, that's part of that job. But so you've got to ask the tough questions. And the other thing is, I think in the few months before, we had believed the government when they told us that they were doing the testing that they promised to do, and it turned out they weren't.
Sure. Now, talking about yo-yoing, you have been
Mm,
criticizing the
mm,
yo-yoing between lockdowns that Auckland
yeah.
has to go through.
Mm.
So, is it fair to say that probably National has also been yo-yoing in terms of their COVID response strategy? At some point, we were saying that you are opening borders soon, you are wanting trans-Tasman bubble, and then suddenly we see that you are in favor of complete elimination strategy.
Well, I can tell you that there wasn't any yo-yoing other than the fact that we were believing what the government told us. So the government said they had the quarantining and the managed isolation sorted. They were testing, they were doing this, they were keeping us safe, and so we believed it. But the other thing, the person who first started talking about the trans-Tasman bubble, travel bubble, was actually not our former leader, but actually Jacinda Ardern. She was the one talking to Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, about it, and all my predecessor did was to believe that she knew what she was talking about. Turned out she didn't.
Hmm. Okay.
Mm,
Now, talking about this whole thing, what we are facing right now,
Yeah.
it's a lot of people, they believe that there is a competing challenge of managing this public health crisis, plus looking after the economy and progressing as well. So how do you see that?
See, I don't think that they're competing challenges. I think the fact is, if we do what we've said we would do around the border, which is have a single border protection agency set up to make sure that if we say things are being tested, that they're being tested, putting in place the technology that we know is available, whether it's the COVID app on our phones or whether it's a form of COVID Bluetooth card type thing, that in place. And we checked on people in managed isolation. We made sure things were being done. As we said, we don't have to have lockdowns. We've seen a jurisdiction where we haven't had to have lockdowns, and that's Taiwan. They didn't have to have lockdowns, and they've only had 12 deaths. The 23 million people live there, and they've been able to bring people in by testing before people go on planes, testing the 2 times afterwards in that first 14 days, and actually using the technologies and significantly better results actually than New Zealand. And in New Zealand, we know we did better than many other countries, but actually we are the most isolated country on the earth.
I get that.
It's not hard to do.
Well, coming back to your suggestion, and which we have heard many times, comparing with Taiwan, I'm not sure if that is reasonable and a fair comparison with Taiwan, given that Taiwan have a history of dealing with public endemic pandemics probably for 2 decades. And don't you think they have the time to their advantage? They have learned, they have built those institutions that you were talking about
Well,
now?
the thing is that they've learnt. And the thing is, we should learn from people who are doing it better, and we shouldn't just say, gosh, we did it well. No, we didn't, because we did it well in the first lockdown, but the problem is that since then the lessons of that lockdown were not learnt. And what we found out is that the government was, in fact, not doing the testing they said was happening. They were not looking after the ports, the seaports. They were not doing that testing, and there's no point one arm of government saying they're doing the testing and the other arm saying, oh, well, maybe not. And so that's not good enough. And actually, you don't have to have had experience in pandemics to know if you're going to have testing, then do the testing. And why are you doing the testing? Because it's important. So, maybe New Zealand authorities should look a little bit wider than just telling everyone that they did well. Actually, we all know as a country it could have been a lot worse. We understand that. But the big thing is, Sandeep, and this is where it's really coming in and out of lockdown, that's what really hurts the economy. And, as we saw that level 4 lockdown in Auckland, every day 400 people around the country, including 250 in Auckland, were losing their jobs.
Sure.
And those jobs have not come back, and they will not come back unless we can grow the economy. We can't grow the economy. We've got no confidence in the border management.
Fair enough. I know that you were tempted to talk a lot about economy. We will definitely talk
Yeah,
about that.
absolutely. Wow,
But
it's
before
the
that,
big issue.
yes. So if I have to ask you, what is your vision for the next 3 years? Like, how do you see the world unfolding? Do you see that we are going to live with COVID, and how we are going to manage, once again, the competing challenge, which you have said, between COVID and economy?
Well, I don't think there need to be competing challenges. I think that that's a bit of a soft cop out, really, to expect that you can't keep the economy going with a COVID response. The fact is, you do a great COVID response, not just a good one, but a great one, and you use technology. There's nothing to stop the economy keeping going. The worst thing for our economy is to yo-yo in and out of lockdown. So I think they do need to work together. But in terms of our economy, we've got to have responsible fiscal or economic management. We cannot have the sort of paying out of money and just constantly paying out. We can't continue down a path of that. It was needed for a while with the wage subsidy, but it can't last forever, and it needs to come to an end. It's costing us $500 million a week. That is actually the price of building a great big hospital in Christchurch or a great big hospital in Hawke's Bay. That is one hospital a week that's being stopped, you could say, because of it. That's the cost. And that money all has to be paid back. So that's really important. It's really important too that we get rid of things like the Resource Management Act, RMA, and we put in place better legislation that's actually about getting businesses to be in business. It's about taking away that sort of, red tape and real difficulties trying to get anything done. But it's also about reinvesting in people and getting them skills that they need for a very modern economy, and thinking about what skills we're going to need in the next few years. So that's really important. But we need to also be thinking about how we can use technology so much smarter, so that we are using things like Bluetooth technology, that we're using, and we're picking up with that infrastructure that we built, the ultra-fast broadband. That was a National Party infrastructure build. Now that was something which people thought, oh, do we really need it? Well, actually we did. And using that and using other technology like that to actually build the economy. So everything we do needs to be basically about building the economy, keeping communities safe, but really it's got to be about that. If we don't have that, Sandy, as a little country at the bottom of the world and not taking advantage of our isolation as we can, it is not a good economic outlook.
Sure.
So we can do it though, but we've got to be really smart.
Smart, get it? Now, how comfortable you would be to opening the borders for international travel after you form a government?
Not unless we can actually know that they're safe, and we'd have to be very careful how we did that. I think the last thing we need to do is to just open up borders and say, well, we'll just let it in. We've never said that. In fact, what we've always said is we can only do it where it's safe. And clearly at the moment, it's not safe, because I don't have any confidence that things that we've been told are happening around testing is actually happening. And I would want to see that the not only testing, but the technology is being used in a way to keep New Zealand safe.
So basically, so you want to have a fresh start. Say, if you have formed a government, say in mid-November, probably you will have a fresh look, and then you will
Absolutely. So the first thing we'd do is to have we've got a border protection agency that we put in place, but just how we would do all of that in terms, and if we needed to ever have any lockdowns, how we could do them in a relatively discreet and smaller way, rather than entire third of the country taken out because of a few particular issues that had happened. And that's actually about having a public health forum to start with, to get together not only the public health people, but also people in business, people in in small businesses, large businesses, but trade unions, everybody who wanted to be involved, about how we manage things from there on in. Because I tell you what, Sandeep, I thought the first lockdown, everybody tried to do their best. Everybody was on board as a country. We all understood how important it was. We had businesses closed, even though they shouldn't have been closed, like greengrocers and local butchers closed. And then the second lockdown came, and all of a sudden a whole new ministry was in charge. It was Ministry of Health. A lot of the exemptions that had been given before didn't work anymore. It was a mess. And as you know, in Auckland, a lot of people suffered more than they needed to suffer.
Fair enough. Now, moving forward to and talking about the community issues, which matters to our Kiwi Indian community, we know that National Party has got 2 Kiwi Indian MPs.
Yes.
So, are you being regularly briefed by them about what are the pressing issues of the Kiwi Indian community?
Well, obviously we do, and as you know, in particular, we've got Parmjit Palmer and my very good friend Kanwal Singh Bakshi, and we're always hearing from both of them about what people are hearing. And
what exactly you're hearing?
Well, one of the things they're seeing at the moment is a lot of Kiwi Indians are actually in business, and they're very worried, particularly if small businesses, about the lack of resilience in the business community. But we're also hearing about the latest immigration changes that the government announced yesterday. So I think they need to explain some of those changes and why they specifically don't include Indian New Zealanders.
Sure. So talking about immigration, I would just give you a heads up that it is one of the pressing issues that the community has been facing probably last 2.5 years. And the perception out there in the community is that on many occasions probably National Party was not that loud enough to offer them support or call out the government's policy, which they felt was probably not helping them. So that is the perception out there. So what we want to know from you is what would be National Party's stand on some of the pressing immigration issues. To start with, say, last time when this government actually abolished or say changed the rules for parent visa category.
Yeah.
Well, that was, I would say, a big hit and which basically disenfranchised a big number of ethnic migrant communities who were basically made to feel, just like they can't bring their parents, and so we never heard anything strongly from National Party leadership.
Well, I thought, well, of course, I wasn't the leader, but I think too is that it's always so good to remember, Sandeep, that at the last election, the Labour Party, New Zealand First, and the Greens all ran on limited immigration, more limited than what we had already had in place. And the Labour Party in particular ran on an anti-Chinese sounding names type agenda and blaming immigrants for what they said was the housing crisis. Mm-hmm. That's what they referred to it. Of course, that crisis, if there was one, has actually just got worse. And strangely enough, immigration is not where it was. So we have now a massive skills crisis, mm-hmm. and that is because we can't attract the right people to come here who bring skills that we need, and we know that there are plenty of businesses saying to us, we need highly skilled, experienced people, and we can't bring them in. So that's where the border policy is so important as well. We haven't put out our immigration policy yet, but we have our view is very much in the National Party, as it has been in the past, that we need people with skills, experience who are going to help grow our economy.
Sure.
And we cannot hold back businesses because of a perception of, too much immigration, whatever. But we do need to have, we have always have had limited immigration in New Zealand since I've been alive anyway. But it has always got to be about what's in the best interest of New Zealanders.
Now, talking about the skills that you say that we need it desperately, probably there are tens of thousands of skilled temporary visa holders, work visa holders, who are working in this country and they have been locked out for it's the last 6 months because of government's border closure.
Yep.
And in that respect as well, I'm sorry to say that the perception out there is that National Party has not been seen strongly supporting their cause. So what's National Party's stand?
Well, our view is always that if you are a New Zealand citizen, that we need to get you into work, if we can possibly get you into work. But we've also been very supportive of people who have been caught here in New Zealand on temporary visas. But we're not going to be releasing our immigration policy today, Sandy. Mm-hmm. And we're very supportive of the fact that people who are here because that they've overstayed their visas, but it's not their fault. That those obviously there's an
that's
embassy
altogether
there.
different issue.
That's an entirely different issue. But we're not at all anti them at it, and we think
so
understand.
What basically I'm asking is the tens of thousands of temporary visa holders, work visa holders, who were living and working in New Zealand before being caught out. Now they are locked out of borders. And
you mean they're outside of New Zealand?
Outside of New Zealand, yes. So they had valid visas, but they are locked out, and now they can't enter back.
I think. Look, we can't cope at the moment with the immigration. That sort of tens of thousands of people because we don't have the quarantine or managed isolation facilities.
So would you commit to invest to build those MIQ facilities?
That's part of our border policy, which we've talked about, is how we could actually do that better. And yes, there are going to be certain commitments made around that, but it's really important to understand that right now, when we don't actually have confidence in the quarantining system that there is at the moment in terms of its operation, because we're finding out almost daily about further issues with that and breaks in the system that we were told is in place, then that won't be happening until we have total confidence in the border. And the other thing is too, Sandeep, is we're dealing with the fact that we now have 220,000 people on the unemployment benefit, and some of those people are highly skilled, highly trained, very hard-working people, and through no fault of their own, they're out of jobs. And I can tell you this, that we will have to make New Zealand citizens their priority, our priority, because they are the people that we have to be first committed to. So for those who are caught out,
so you have got no commitment for those temporary visa holders?
I'm saying those temporary visa holders who are not in New Zealand, we can't bring those in until we're, number one, safe on the border, and number two, we know just the extent of the economic downturn that we're facing.
So do you want to put a time frame when, say, after November you become Prime Minister?
Well, we'll find out more then. We've got the government books as such, they're basically the accounts are being opened up in what's called the preview, and that's next week. We'll have a better idea about just how a hit the economy has already taken, but please bear in mind, 185,000 New Zealanders have told Statistics New Zealand or Stats New Zealand that they expect to have lost their jobs by next year. So I can tell you this, our priority will always be New Zealand citizens first.
Sure, no. Well, I completely agree with
Yep.
that. But again, by saying that, probably you are reiterating a myth that migrants, they come and they take the jobs of citizens and residents, which is not the case.
Well,
Research
I'm
doesn't
not.
back that.
No, it's not that. It's the fact that we will need to make sure that we have those skills and jobs available still. There's no point people coming in if the jobs aren't there, and there's no point people coming in if we have people who are highly qualified, able to do it. But, it's like when people come in for work, we need to have the jobs available. We don't know quite how bad this is going to be, but I can tell you the Reserve Bank, which is an independent, not connected to political parties, has said we're about to face the worst economic times New Zealand has faced in 160 years.
Sure,
that's enormous. So I tell you what, we'll see how it goes.
Yes. So I'm talking about the temporary migrants. They were living in the country, actually. They were living and working on a visa. They had valid visas that were actually valid for probably a couple of more years. And now they are not being allowed to come back. So do you think it's a good look on the global reputation of New Zealand that they can basically turn their doors on them today just because we feel like that?
No, well, when they're outside, it's very difficult. And we always have to have compassionate grounds as well, I believe. I think it's very unfair, and I've certainly advocated for a family in my own electorate where the wife had gone over to actually South Africa in that case for a wedding and couldn't come back and was stopped by the current government. And the response I got from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was in charge of it, was, sorry, shouldn't have gone. And that's what the current government's saying. I tell you what, we just got to understand that I think that there are grounds for compassionate reasons for this to happen, for people to be able to come back, and I find terrible that we've got separated families. So of course we can do something.
Any time frame that you would put for yourself?
Well, we have to be in government first, and then we'd have to make sure we got that border right, but we'll be able to do it.
Okay. Now, moving forward and talking about trade, you have been a great supporter of trade, and you want to do that. So what are your vision about, I would say, enhancing or progressing the bilateral trade between New Zealand and India? How do you see it?
Well, over the years, we've had many attempts to increase the bilateral trade and have a free trade agreement with India, and it hasn't been always smooth sailing. But where there are opportunities, of course. I mean, India has, as we know, enormous skill and experience in IT, tech in particular. New Zealand has some very highly skilled tech people as well. And I think, tech is the way of the future for us. We're both big agricultural producers. We're big agricultural exporters as well. India's an enormous agricultural powerhouse. But it is really important that we also look at other things too, such as particularly in the tech area. I think India is one of the countries that we can do a lot more with, because also India is a democracy like New Zealand. It's the largest democracy, as you know, in the world, and we share very similar systems around law, the rule of law, and a common law system. All of these things can make business easier for us to do.
Sure. Well, that's a great commentary, I would say, on the bilateral relation. And from what we have noted that I think Sir John Key visited India 2 times, and then your former producer, National Party leader, Simon Bridges, was there. So do you have plans?
Well, I will, but I've got this other thing called an election to deal with first. But yes, and just over the years, I haven't had that opportunity, but I'm very keen for us to be able to do some more once we sort out the COVID issues, and it's basically we can have some international travel. At the moment, international travel's on hold, I've got to say.
No, I completely understand that. Now, I was just getting your vision, basically. So now coming and talking about elections, let's understand what's your vision for ethnic migrant communities, why they should be voting for National, what National has got to offer them.
Well, actually, building a strong economy is really important. I tell you what, Sandeep, I think like every migrant family generally come to New Zealand for a better economic outlook, better opportunities to get ahead, but also a lifestyle. But actually, it's about the economy. And if you look at me, I mean, I was Minister of Ethnic Communities for 4 years in 2 terms of government. It's something that is very dear to my heart too, and I feel very strongly about understanding that everybody who comes to New Zealand, whether their ancestors came on a waka as Maori, or whether they came on aeroplane some months ago, everyone who comes here to be a Kiwi needs to be dedicated to New Zealand, and New Zealand needs to be dedicated to them.
Sure.
And that we need to accept everybody. And I am very strongly of that view. I've written about it, I've talked about it, I live it. And I tell you what, the one thing I hate is holding people back or making assumptions based on ethnicity.
Sure. So talking about the ethnic communities office that you held, so would you commit to elevate that office to a full ministry of ethnic
Well, we could do
communities?
that actually, but I think at the moment the main thing people would be wanting us to do is to focus on the economy.
Sure.
So we've in the past, I recall that the previous or the current Labor government had actually said that they were going to do that. I'm not sure they actually did in the end. I think that sort of is another broken promise. There we go. Well, just another one, along with Kiwi Build and everything else, child poverty and all the other ones. So it was just a broken promise. I am very focused on the fact that you have a very good minister and you have a prime minister who actually understands and has been around for long enough to understand that actually every migrant community I see, Sandy, what I want to do is get on, be part of the community, actually retain cultural parts of culture that are really important to people, but also just want to get ahead in life. Sure. That's why people come. That's why people migrate. People don't migrate to do what? Sit in the sun. People migrate because they want to actually get ahead.
Sure. No, that's a great vision, and it's for readers and viewers to get understand and decide where they want to cast their vote. But before I let you go, a couple of more questions. Judith, if I have to ask you one policy that you think would be most dear to your heart after you become Prime Minister, which policy or area that would be?
Right, dearest to my heart, well, very first has to be sorting out the border so that we can then move with far more confidence in the economy. But actually I so want to get rid of the RMA Act. I am so getting rid of Resource Management Act. That is like number one thing for me after we sort out the border. But the other thing has to be very much focused about everything we do has to be about building infrastructure, building jobs, building roads, building
that's your whole vision.
It is all about growing the economy. It's all about growing the economy.
Sure.
Everything we do has to be focused on that. And clearly, the environment is part of that. But you know what? If we don't grow that economy, Sandy, we're only 5 million people. And at the bottom of the world, we're going to miss opportunities. And that growing the economy is using our tech areas and everything else. Tell you what, it's just got to be growth. If we don't do growth, it's backwards. And anyone who's been in business knows if you're not going forward with your business, you're actually going backwards.
Perfect.
And I don't want to be going backwards. We're going forward.
And we know that you. So the one part of growing quickly is to not to hold you back, basically. And
That's
we
right.
do understand you have to rush and go for some major announcements today in Auckland.
Yeah.
We look forward to that announcement as well. And thanks for stopping by and having this conversation. All the best for your remaining of your campaign, and we look forward to speak to you again.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Right.